3.5 years working on stories about and a book about 9/11. And is this working? Can everybody hear me okay? And it was, I mean, really interesting work. It was also by far the most difficult thing I'd ever done in my life, including being married. It was not only hard, it wasn't hard in an interesting way. It was just stupefyingly difficult. It just required just sheer grunt labor for a long time and without much progress. You just spend months and not get anything. And besides that, the subject itself was deeply depressing. And by the time it was over, I just had this horrible sadness, and I was exhausted. I mean, really, all I wanted to do was like go out in the desert and lay down for 2 weeks and let it bake out of me. But I had to go back to work at the newspaper, and I went back, and they said, "What would you like to do now?" And I said, I really don't have a clue. I hadn't thought about it. I've just been too wrapped up in this other thing. This isn't going to work. Nope, never mind. And I said, I don't know what subject I want to do, but I know one thing. I said I want it to be fun, and I want it to be easy. And my editor said, take a couple weeks, poke around, see what you can find, then we'll talk again. So I go home. 2 days later, the phone rings, and it's him. And I go, "Hi, Dean. What's up?" And he said, "Well, I got it. This editor is the best editor I ever worked for, without anybody being a close second. And he also had a bad habit of having great ideas. If the editors have bad ideas, you just tell them they're bad ideas and just please leave you alone and go away. But he always had great ideas, and he was enthusiastic about them. He was also like the world's greatest con man. And so I said, "Well, you got an idea?" I said, "But I thought it was my turn." Our deal was I'd do one of his stories and then one of mine. And his story had lasted 3.5 years, so I felt like I had one coming, a pretty big one coming. And he says, "Well, I know." He says, but I was thinking about this last night, and the story idea came to me. He says, and this is, editors do this all the time. He says, "And you're the only guy who could do it." And reporters are so stupid, every one of them. I mean, a friend of mine from Seattle that and Carol Ostrom used to say that reporters are just little puppies. They just want somebody to tickle their bellies. And it's pretty much the case. We're infantile. And of course, when they say this, you know that they're lying. But you also think, maybe he's right. Maybe he doesn't mean it, but it's probably true. And I said, "Well, okay, what is it?" And he says, "Abu Ghraib." And I was just stunned. I said, "What part of fun and easy don't you understand?" I says, "That's 9/11 was hard. This is a cesspool. I mean, who wants to jump in there?" He says, "Yeah, I know, but I got a great idea. Nobody's going to do it. In fact, nobody could do it, but you. You're the only one." And so I said, "What is it? Jesus, what's the idea?" He said, "Well, we need to tell a story from inside the night shift on the cell block where all the torturing happened. And you need to get cooperation from at least one or several of the guards, and get what the world looked like to them. Put us right there on the cell block." I said, "Well, yeah, it's a great idea, but nobody's going to get that." He says, "You can." And I go, shit, so okay. I said, "I'll give it a shot." And so I knew nothing about the story at all. So I started putting together names of the guards, their lawyers, the generals, the jailers, and start calling around and getting nowhere pretty fast. But eventually I got one of the chief guys, the NCOIC in charge of the night shift, Chip Grainer, to agree that he would sit down for an unlimited series of interviews, tell me everything. He would urge others to talk, nothing held back. So it was like, Dean was right. I got the guy. I was the guy. He picked the right reporter for this. And then on the other hand, I thought, man, this is terrible. I'm going to be spending 6 months doing nothing but this. And about a week before I was going down to Houston to start the interviews, his lawyer called and said, "It's all off. We've cut a deal with the prosecutor. He's not talking to anybody ever again." And I went, "Thank God." But I also knew that I had to come up with a story fast, because as soon as I told Dean this, I knew that tomorrow the phone would ring. I got it. And it'd be something else that was horrible to do. And I'd had this idea for a long time. back from when I was working at the Seattle Times, actually, when I first went to work there, this odd thing, I was a reporter, you go out and report on stories, and you use your own car to do this. The Seattle Times charged you to park your car so that you could take it out to do their work. And everybody went along with it. It wasn't much. I don't know, it was like 25 or 30 bucks a month. But I thought it was appalling. I just refused to do it, which turns out not to be the smartest thing in the world. I mean, I got parking tickets every other day. And you know how city parking is. The streets, you park here one day, there the next. 2 hours, you're always moving your car. Half the time I had no idea where it was. I'd walk out of the building at night and I go, where's my car? And I put that down on my list of stories. Sat there for 15 years. Where's my car? I thought you could do a story explaining how you know where your car is. And so I called Dean the next day. I says, I got it. It's where's my car? I'm going to go find my car. I'm going to find out how you remember, how you make memories. He goes, okay, sounds good. So I said, okay. And of course I know nothing about it. I hadn't had a biology class since high school, which didn't go too well. And I'm sorry for this. This is really awkward because it's down here. I started calling around. I made a list of, just like the prison guards, you make a list of neuroscientists, and they'll lead one to another. And I started talking to them and calling them up and explaining I wanted to go to a lab and spend some time in a lab so I could describe what they do there. And best of all would be to follow a project from beginning to end, so that you'd have a story. It wouldn't just be a term paper, it would actually be a narrative story that you could then hang all the knowledge of memory off of, which is kind of a typical journalistic device. You get a main through line, a main narrative, and then you can actually tell somebody anything. If this narrative is good enough, they'll stick with you through the science, theoretically. And one of the guys I called was this fellow named Gary Lynch at the University of California, Irvine. And I'll read a little section of the first chapter here, which describes our first meeting. And I'll warn you, Lynch talks like a reporter or a sailor. If that's offensive to anyone, let me know and I'll make something else up. Is that bothersome? Yeah, you say that now. Okay, chapter 1, the talking cure. Save for Lynch lab was empty the day I arrived. A clear blue winter morning in the last week of December 2004. Outside, the parking lot contained nothing but clean black asphalt and bright white lines. Inside, the double ranks of stainless steel lab benches were bare and quiet. Much to Gary Lynch's chagrin, every single one of the dozen or so scientists, students, and technicians who worked in the lab had gone on holiday. Lynch's attitude toward other people's vacations could most charitably be described as dim. He worked 365 days a year. Why couldn't they? Especially now. Scientists in Lynch's lab at UC Irvine had recently developed a technique that Lynch, a neuroscientist who had been investigating the biochemistry of memory for more than 30 years, thought would allow researchers for the first time to visualize a physical trace of memory. That is, to see a map of the physical changes in the brain that occur when a memory is made. This was not an insignificant undertaking. For at least a century, scientists have been trying and failing to do exactly what Lynch thought his lab was on the verge of accomplishing. To teach an animal a new skill or experience, to, in other words, expose that animal's brain to something in the exterior world, then look deeply enough into the close, dark, complicated space that is the mammalian brain, and say with certainty, there, right there, that's it. The thing itself, Lynch sometimes called it, making it sound like a rumored but never quite glimpsed spirit in the night. Such a physical trace of memory is commonly called an engram. Carl Lashley, a famed American psychologist, had popularized the term in the mid-20th century and had devoted a significant portion of his career to pursuing it. His search had been exhaustive and in the end fruitless. Almost all memory research in Lashley's day as now is done by implication. For most of human history, memory investigators have been forced to stand outside the brain, trying to determine what was going on in the lost world inside. The tools long did not exist to look directly for the answers to researchers' questions. Lynch was part of a generation of scientists that came after Lashley and for the first time moved the search into the complex machinery of the brain's interior. His generation had advanced to the threshold of addressing some of the great fundamental questions of the human condition. The move from outside in has finally given them a fighting chance to uncover the molecular mechanisms of the brain.